The first and probably the most important thing is that tell management that incidents are inevitable. Regardless of how much you're going to invest, something might happen. There are just too many angles and too many things you need to catch in order to stop all incidents. Now, after I've said that, I'm telling you what I can do. Essentially, I'm telling them that we will limit the attack surface as much as possible. We'll improve visibility. But because we assume incidents will happen, we also have to work on what happens when an incident happens. First and foremost, probably, is user awareness around the browser. Because many people today don't really understand the concept of what happens when you install an app on your browser. Right? It's very easy. 2 clicks and it's done. It looks much less threatening than the whole install next, except all terms that you used to do in the past on Windows. It's very easy and it can be potentially very dangerous. You need to be able to admit that you don't know everything and probably you don't know most of it, right? And once you realize that, you feel comfortable hiring people that are smarter than you and they can help you with driving the big ship that is security.
Hi, Tal. Welcome to the Fearless podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, I would like to share your background for our guests who, joining this episode and want to learn more about you, about your career. So Tal actually is a former CTO and CISO at the Carlsberg Group, and your journey spans nearly 3 decades in the space, from IDF's elite cybersecurity units to CTO roles at civil logistics and regional security manager at Canon Europe. And it's such a privilege to have you here. Maybe to kick things off, if you could take us early to your earlier days, how did you get into cybersecurity and why did you choose to join this space in the first place?
Well, first, apologies to people who heard me in other podcasts because I keep repeating the same story because I think it's a fun story, actually. I'll start by saying there wasn't really cybersecurity as such when I started in this field. We didn't use cool hype words at that point. We called ourselves information security or IT security. People that didn't like us used to call us the IT police, but that's beside the point. It was back in my military days where I started my first officer posting, and I was approached by the commanding officer of the unit who asked me, do you know anything about computers? And I said, yes, a little bit. I worked in a computer shop before I started my service, and I studied a bit in high school. He said, okay, congratulations, you're now the IT security officer of the unit. Which is, and I will say, I had nothing to do with computers at that position, right? It was something completely unrelated. But essentially, that's a very typical thing of the IDF, is that they just throw random positions at you because they think you might have the right experience in that. And that kind of threw me into the whole world of information security, IT security, what was becoming cyber at a later point. And in my second posting, one of the options I got was to become the CISO of what was then the central computing campus of the Israeli military, which was a combination of all the main computing units that were running a lot of very exciting stuff. I mean, we're talking late 90s, so exciting stuff back in the day. And that really got me into that field to really understand more what I'm doing, to feel quite awed with all the very smart people that knew much more than I did on IT systems and computers. And that got me interested enough to continue doing that also as part of my civilian life when I finished my service.
Wow, what a journey. I would assume it's so incredibly difficult to join the space that you didn't really study. Let's say you just were put as the head of this IT department. What were the first thing that you did to help you at least set the ground, because it was so new and something you've never done?
Well, first of all, I panicked. After I finished panicking, then I started studying. And that's something I think that you have to keep doing. Even today with security, you need to do that all the time, to study, to read, to show interest, to understand what's happening. Even if you don't do formal studying, you need to have enough conversations with the people around you to understand at least the basics of what's happening. I mean, even today, when you look at the security field, it's moving ahead so fast, and things that used to be like cutting edge technology 5 years ago are kind of gone now. or became mainstream is that you just can't stop. You have to keep studying and just be okay with the fact that you don't know everything and trust the people around you to know as well.
Okay. So in a way, constantly learn from people that are around you when you just starting things off. And to be fair, later on, we're going to have a question, how do you stay up to date with the tech today? But so far, you've had a diverse set of experiences from military to enterprise roles to even consumer brands like Canon and Carlsberg. Tell us about the journey and if there were any challenges to switch contexts so many times.
There's always, I mean, on the one hand, there are challenges, right? Because the focus points between each company is different, and it's not necessarily what people think. Right? To give you an example, when you hear logistics, you just think about trucks moving boxes around, but people don't realize that logistic companies are actually IT powerhouses. They're running huge IT arrays because at any given time, you're running millions of items all across the world, or store them, and you need to store them in certain conditions, and there's brokerage involved. And there definitely the correctness of the information, the availability is critical. If you look at consumer brands like Carlsberg, over there, you need to make sure that the quality of the beer remains, and as we say, the beer must flow all the time. So also availability and the correctness of the manufacturing process. So there's always studying, there's always new things. The challenge, I think, is do not necessarily try or assume that what you've done in one industry would work in the other. There's always similarities. There's always things which are similar to everyone. When you look at enterprises, is always the basic stuff that you do the same. But practices that worked in a very fast-paced moving logistics company will not necessarily work for a very old, very traditional company like Carlsberg that is doing something completely different. So you always need to first and foremost understand the business, understand also the appetite of the business to deal with security challenges, and then you can start doing your job.
What are some of the key differences that made you think, okay, when you joined Carlsberg and you thought, okay, this is completely different approach that I have to adopt? What are some of these differences that CISOs that are thinking of shifting from one industry to another should consider? Like just an example of these two industries.
I would actually say that my biggest challenge was not necessarily about the industry. It was actually about the team. And that's a lesson that I learned the hard way about myself. In previous positions, I either established a team from scratch or nearly from scratch. So that means that I actually hired most of the people myself, or hired the first year myself, and they knew me. We built everything from scratch. Communication was easier in that sense. We had a mutual trust from the beginning. In Carlsberg, I actually stepped into an existing team, and they didn't know me. And they didn't know my communication style. And I was assuming I'm doing everything, okay, and I'm being open enough, and they know exactly what's happening. But then a few months after I started the position, my boss, the CIO, called me and she told me, your team are very worried. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, they have no clue what you're doing, and they're very worried about your direction. And, my first instinct was, what are you talking about? I keep telling them what I'm doing. But then after I cooled down a little bit and I was thinking about it, I realized that I was doing the same communication style I did with previous jobs with people that knew me from the scratch. And I didn't spend enough time in creating trust with the new team. And then I actually stopped everything. I did several very long conversation workshops with them, and I tried to explain my logic much more, so they're not so much worried about what I'm doing. So they understand that we're going to work together rather than me running all over them and doing my own stuff. So lesson for the future: when you're going into a mature team or an existing team, spend some time understanding the people, understanding what they know and what they think should happen before you start running over the place.
Wow, that's a great lesson. And I think it's so important, whether you are in security field or not in security field, this ability to not only shift context for yourself, but also ability to shift context for other people, because they had no clue who you are. And I think person's background is so important. And that's why we do on this podcast, I think whatever happens in your past, in a way, shows the way you look at security today. So all of these lessons are super important. So when you joined Carlsberg as a CISO, what was the biggest security challenge you encountered on day one, except for establishing this trust?
I mean, obviously there were a multitude of things, right? There was nothing that was a disaster, right? But there was a lot of things that were either a bit disorganized or not mature enough. One thing that happened that I came in was I was asking, where's my OT security team? The team that actually deal with brewery security. And they told me, what's OT security? We have no clue what you're talking about. And then I asked, okay, so who's actually dealing with OT security? And the answer was a shrug. So I just basically told them, you know what, I'm dealing with OT security. It's going to be my job from now on, and leave it with me. And I got lucky there because Carlsberg, generally speaking, is a company which is very open for innovation and for implementing new things. And so that's one thing that played in my benefit. The other thing that played in my benefit was the management of the manufacturing group at that point were mostly ex-Mondelez. Mondelez is a big, also consumer brand company. You'll probably know most of their brands. They deal with food, the food manufacturers. And they actually suffered also a big ransomware event on the back of WannaCry and NotPetya back in 2017. So one of them that was running a region at that point in Carlsberg in terms of manufacturing, he told me, I experienced ransomware in my region once. I never want to feel that again. So let's talk about what you can do to prevent that. And that really gave me a push. And we ended up, I mean, we're a few years after establishing a really a super efficient and very exciting OT security operation. So that was one thing that went well.
Yeah, I think it's like when these kind of incidents happen, of course, this is the time to start thinking, okay, what should we do internally differently? So what kind of practices did you bring in place when it comes to preparation for such a big attacks out there? What are the things that you told the management, okay, this is what we're supposed to shift and this is what we should focus on?
I think the first and probably the most important thing is that tell management that incidents are inevitable. And they need to understand that, right? Regardless of how much you're going to invest, something might happen, right? There are just too many angles and too many things you need to catch in order to stop all incidents. Now, after I've said that, I'm telling them what I can do. Essentially, I'm telling them that we will limit the attack surface as much as possible. We'll improve visibility. But because we assume incidents will happen, we also have to work on what happens when an incident happens. So that means a very strong backup regimen, but a backup regimen can also sustain a ransomware event. So that means a lot of offsite backup and a backup that cannot be written by anything. Also, you need to establish business continuity and disaster recovery plan, and you need to make them very practical. So in fact, you have a checklist that no one ever looks at and is collecting dust somewhere. That doesn't really help anyone. So you need to have a very practical way of doing that, and you need to exercise it over and over and over again. So when you actually get to that incident, which of course we hope never happens, it's almost like muscle memory. Everyone knows who to call, everyone knows what's going to happen, and then hopefully you survived this incident in good shape.
Yeah, those are all the great steps. And, I think a lot of companies right now do a lot of research on ransomware and the way it's typically conducted. And we also recently disclosed this research on browser native ransomware, since we are on this topic, where threat actors right now exploiting identities as opposed to attacking with software. So as browser becomes more of a central operating system rather than just an app, how should this inform security strategy?
I think if you look a little bit even beyond the browser, or you just look at the endpoint, and the browser is the entry point, but the endpoint, the laptop, the tablet, the whatever you're using, has been the important bit of security for years now. And that's because the network perimeter, is not there anymore, right? People are moving around. If in a few years ago, taking your laptop home every day was unthinkable, you didn't even have a laptop, right? Today is a standard, right? I think no one is leaving their laptop at work. You are available everywhere and anywhere. And when you start thinking about the browser and the endpoint as the part of the network, regardless, or part of the organizational ecosystem, regardless from where you are, where you're working from, that helps you determine the strategy. And that means that you can make it part of the network wherever you are. If you use something like a SASE or a zero trust approach, it means that you need to really look at what the browser is doing in terms of anomaly behavior and monitoring of all the applications working, or not applications, all the extension operating on the browser. It means that you need to look very carefully at all the traffic going from the browser into your cloud environment and secure the cloud environment as well, as much as possible. And first and foremost, probably is user awareness around the browser, because I think many people today don't really understand the concept of what happens when you install an app on your browser. Right? It's very easy. 2 clicks and it's done. It looks much less threatening than the whole install next, except all terms that you used to do in the past on Windows. It's very easy, and it can be potentially very dangerous.
Yeah. I like the point that you said. It makes the whole experience easy. And as companies try to simplify the whole customer journey for their customers, attackers are also trying to simplify the journey as they target someone. So unfortunately, this is the nature of attacks today, where it becomes so easy to target someone. And I understand that you also spearheaded a massive SASE deployment at Carlsberg. So maybe tell us a story about that.
So we decided to go for a SASE deployment as part of a network program that Carlsberg decided to join all the regional networks into a single global network. We were in a place where we were ready to do that. And one of the things we're looking at is a SASE option. It wasn't the main driver, but it was, we want to look at option. Mm-hmm. And one of the contenders for the RFP that we ran back in the day was a single vendor SASE player that, without naming names, because it's not probably not the right audience, but their offering was so amazing in terms, not just in terms of security, but also in terms of the way that they run a network and the way that both of these technologies are connecting, as SASE basically should, that we decided to take a chance of them. And we actually managed to deploy a new global network with hundreds of physical sites in less than a year. And that's not something I've seen before. Network transformation programs are typically very difficult. You expect things to crash all the time, to lose sites. This thing just happened more or less. I mean, of course, the difficulties and challenges, but it happened. And I was very proud of both the network and security team that made that happen. So that's kind of the future is with the Carlsberg Group now in terms of how they look at networking and how they look at the users connecting to the network from anywhere in the world.
Did you face any of the internal resistance when you were going through such a massive shift, and how did you overcome it?
Yes, there's always resistance in these kind of projects, but it wasn't too bad because, as I mentioned, Carlsberg is a company that really embraces innovation. But I think there was some financial discussion because they were not certain about why we need to invest heavily in this technology now, where most things are working. Right? Mm-hmm. And we had to convince them that the investment now will yield not just improvement in terms of the user experience and bandwidth management, but also in terms of return of investment over time. Not immediately, but we expected quite a significant ROI going forward. So there was a lot of data crunching. There was a lot of conversations one-on-one with senior members of leadership. And ultimately, they said, okay, especially one of them, which was he didn't have the right ROI for his region, but he said, you know what, I'll take a hit for the group because we were very clear. Either we do the whole thing or we're not doing it because it wouldn't make sense to do it for just one region. So a lot of convincing, cajoling, and, hints of physical violence. No, I'm just kidding. But it went well ultimately.
Okay, that's amazing. That's amazing when someone just really understands how necessary one project is and is willing to take that hit. Yeah, and supporting thousands of users across diverse regions must have been extremely, extremely complex. How did you balance security controls and user experience?
I think one thing that I've been trying to do for quite some time now, for several years now, and I think it's something the security industry needs to do as a whole, is that assume that user experience is as important as security controls, right? If you look a few years back, security used to be really not a pleasant thing for the for the employee, for the end user, right? Mm-hmm. Just think about how we used to use something like RSA dongles when we used to do two-factor authentication. You used to have this kind of very bulky piece of equipment on your keychain, and then you have to put the code in, and you have to change it every 3 years. It was horrendous, right? If you take that as an example today, the only thing that happens, you get a pop-up on your phone, says, are you trying to connect? Yes, push here, done. Right? Yeah. That's a massive improvement. But it also means that people are much less likely to avoid using that because, I mean, let's be honest. In the past, when we were difficult in terms of user experience and the policies that we implemented, people just went around us, right? And I had stories in the past where I had field technicians in one of the companies I was working with that didn't like all the security controls on their endpoints. What they did is they actually took out the hard drive and they installed a vanilla hard drive. They didn't have anything on it. So then they retained local admin, no endpoint protection. Everything was beautiful for them. For me, of course, it was a big headache. Today, I think it's much less likely because security controls, but also because we don't make it as difficult for people to actually remain secure. We explain everything that we do. We try to tell them why we're doing it, and we make it as seamless as possible. So every project that I do today invest heavily in culture change, in training, and in explaining to people in a very friendly way, not in a manual. So basically like a small movie, an animated movie that can make it as funny as possible. So this is why we're doing it.
That's a great way of putting it. And while we're on that topic, I'm just thinking about some of the enterprises opting to disallow the use of all Gen AI applications, where they're like, oh, there's potential data leakage. And then I feel like people still find their way around it. What's your take? Would you, let's say you're working in a financial services company that says, okay, this is not something we want our employees to use. Like, if you were in that position, what approach would you take?
You can't block technology and you can't block innovation. Again, people will go around you, right? And going to an older example, we try to block iPhones from coming into the network, the company network, and then tablets, iPads and such. And we failed. And we failed miserably, and we were, circumvented. It's the same thing with AI. We can't stop progress. What we can do is make it less threatening to the organization. So let's say, for example, you can limit the amount of AIs or AI options that the company is using, but still allow it. You can explain to people again what's the danger. You can monitor the use of what's happening on the network. If you're in a company which is highly regulated, like financial industries, and you can't take risks, then you establish a test environment or sandbox that people can play with AI in a more safe way. But you can't block it. You block it, people will go around it. So always find a way to put reasonable controls and explain. And in some point, you might also need to convince the company to take some risks, right? You can't just operate without risk and assume you'll continue forwards in the same pace that other companies will do.
Yeah, I agree with this approach because unfortunately, one way or another, if you destroy the user experience so much and then they see their friend at another company exposed to so much technology and able to use to enhance their productivity, of course, people will look for a way around it.
It's not even user experience today, right? If you look at AI, it's becoming so integrated with the way we operate, right? I don't think I can. I'm exaggerating, right? But I don't think I can continue today without using ChatGPT or the likes on a daily basis multiple times, right? It's become my go-to search engine, and I'm assuming most people are like that as well.
Yeah. I know back in the days, when parents used to say, or used to walk to school for like 10, 15 kilometers. I think right now we will be saying we used to live without ChatGPT and without Claude, without asking so many questions.
I tried to explain to my kids recently how was it not to live without the internet, because I think I am actually lucky that I'm on a generation that went from no internet to what we have today. But I tried to explain to them how is it to live not just without internet, but with low band, with modem based 56K internet connection, which was horrendous, right? Let's be honest. And they just can't relate to it. So I think, as you say, right? I mean, it's a generational thing that we need to also keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's definitely a generational thing. And as you said, we can't stop the progress. So it's only moving forward. And I know that since we're talking about the trending threats, malicious extensions is a big one. And we know that SASE solutions may not be sufficient when it comes to covering malicious extensions. How do you think enterprises should adapt when it comes to extensions?
In this specific case, I think that it does warrant to look at the policy. Assuming that you have a managed browser in the organization, it is worth looking at what you actually allow and disallow in terms of extensions on your browser. I think in most SASE situations or establishing a SASE, you also have a CASB in place, which will allow you some measure of understanding what's actually running from your browser to where. So when you do the implementation as you should, then you have TLS implementation, etc. And of course, you have the option of also using some browser security solution or add-on to also help you better understanding what's actually running within your browser and look at the behavior of the user or the extensions.
Yeah. I think today's threats, also, I don't know if you saw the news, Perplexity and OpenAI just launched their own browsers. So the whole space is getting so heated up that it's very interesting how user journey is going to look like, because we're going to properly use it as a first application for every work that we're doing.
Yeah, we're definitely moving in that direction.
Yeah, and I know that now you're doing advisory work for companies. What are some of the macro trends in security that excite or concern you the most today?
In terms of concern, I think it's more, it is the AI thing. And it's not so much because I'm worried about about attackers weaponizing AI, even though it is coming. I think it's more about the fact that everyone is running very, very fast ahead without really understanding the technology that well, or without having a proper ROI. Right. So basically, they just do it because other people are doing it. So I think that, and then the implementation can be a bit risky. There's definitely a risk for data leak prevention, data leak outside the company. So I think we need to understand what we're doing. Again, not stopping it. So I don't want to contradict what I said before, but we do need to keep an eye on what's happening there. If you look at things that excite me, I think there's various trends that have been going for several years. I really like. It's one of them is the way that you get data from security solutions today is much better than it was before. In the past, you used to get thousands and thousands of pages or fields that tells you that the situation is horrendous. You need to do like these 5,000 things today in order to be on basic security. And that's not doable, right? You'll never be able to achieve any of that. The solutions today are giving you much more condensed, much more focused. This is what's happening. This is what you need to do. And more than that, they're actually talking with each other, right? In the past, try to have solutions from Symantec and McAfee talking with each other. Good luck. Today, almost every solution that I have been using, or actually all of them, I don't remember any of them, had some API that allows it to talk with everything else. So your possibilities to establish an ecosystem that gets a lot of data from a lot of sources and a lot of enrichment is very good. And that means that your understanding of your environment and your attack service is much more advanced than it used to be in the past. So I used to say that I always assume it's never going to be possible to understand all the assets I have on the network and from the outside. I think we're getting to the point where it's going to be possible and maybe even accurate.
Yeah. I think I saw the statistics from Gartner that right now, on average, companies use 45 security products. And it's so crazy to imagine how all of these products, like how all the data is getting collected and that you actually able to interpret whatever is going on there. So I think it's almost I don't know how much multitasking power you're supposed to have to be able to read through so much information.
You can't do it. You can't do it. You're talking about millions of events every day at the very least. So if your solutions are not talking with each other, you're not getting a joint picture somewhere, then you're wasting your money.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a good lesson for all the companies that are looking to start something new. It's like, how well can you integrate with existing solutions out there and make the security leader job much easier?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to talk on a topic of leadership. So I know that you get lots of free beer at Carlsberg. Do you think such perks matter in attracting talent, or they just the icing on the cake?
I think it's a personal preference, right? But I would say, of course, people that like beer, that's quite a big perk, right? The funny thing is that if you go to the Carlsberg headquarters in Copenhagen, some days there are less people, some days there are more people in the office. But one day that the office is going to be completely full is the Tuesday, because that day where everyone gets their beer allowance. So that's when the warehouse opens up, and then you see kind of from midday people start going back and forth with crates of beer. So it's definitely nice. And the other nice thing about it is that Carlsberg do special beers for special occasions. So, for example, a few years ago, there was the 175th birthday of the company. And they took three of the master brewers that work in Carlsberg, and told them, go wild. Do whatever it is you want to do, save no cost, and just do whatever you want. And they created three amazing beers, something that Carlsberg would not necessarily do, that are very special. One of them was like a beer aged in whiskey barrels, which is not something you typically do. And it was amazing. So it's nice to know when something special happens, you're going to get a special beer for the occasion.
Wow. It's like you bring creativity and then you bring beer and magic happens.
It's very true. Actually, if you think about it, Carlsberg has two different R&Ds, and one of the R&Ds actually is a very old lab. All of them are food scientists, and they're doing things which are not necessarily related to beer. They do a lot of things around sustainability as well, and things that are not purely related to the business of Carlsberg. So there's a lot of creativity going around.
Yeah. I saw a few companies. I first thought it's a joke, but some companies hire someone with the title of Chief Failure Officer. What they typically do is like just go about and test any potential project and see if something is gonna work out.
Yeah, you know what? I can definitely live with that title. It's a brilliant title, and I think you have to do it. If you are scared to fail, you will not succeed in moving ahead, right? I mean, if you look at all the startups around security, for example, there are hundreds of them or thousands of them, and very few of them actually succeed. But when they succeed amazingly. And if those people running them wouldn't really want to take the chance on failing, then, where would be all the brilliant technologies that we're seeing these days?
Yeah. That's why I really, really love to listen. We hear so many success stories, but then along all of the success stories, there were like so many failures along the way. So that's a great lesson for anyone who thinks of starting out in this field, that failure is just one step towards success. It's not actually failure. So it's amazing. So as a seasoned security leader, what's your secret to building great security teams?
I think first and foremost, you need to be able to admit that you don't know everything, and probably you don't know most of it, right? And once you realize that, you feel comfortable hiring people that are smarter than you, and they can help you with driving the big ship that is security. That's the first and foremost. I think it is really important to drop the very traditional gatekeeping that the security industry has put in place in the last, 7, 8, 10 years. We always complain we don't have enough people in the industry. But de facto, if you look at many of the job ads there, they say if you want to go into a very basic security position, You need to have 25 years experience. You need to have 8 certificates and masters in computer science, and you need to sing, an opera while standing on one foot. That doesn't help. And so somehow we decided we can't grow a younger generation in security. They have to come from somewhere, and that we can't do that. So I think if you take young talent, and as long as there are people that are willing to learn a lot and spend time in self-studying, why not? And they're curious about everything. I think a multicultural team and a multi-gender team is very important, right? The teams that have as much as possible equal amount of men and women and coming from different cultures are richer teams in terms of their capability to actually tackle issues, right? They're more balanced, they're working better. And I've seen that with Carlsberg, right? I had brilliant employees in the team that really helped moving the agenda forward. I think you need to allow them to give them time to study. I think you need to allow them to go to courses and conferences. And I think you need to also keep them happy, right? If they are getting bored in what they're doing, then start working on career path for them in maybe other areas in security. We moved in my teams, we moved a lot of people from one team to another because, they've been in somewhere a few years and they want to try something new. So keep them interested. By the end of it, running a security team is not different than running other technical teams. I think it's more the conception sometimes we put in front of ourselves that we are different, but no, we're not that different from other teams.
What do you mean we are not that different from the perspective of there's gatekeeping in terms of how technical everyone is, or what?
Yeah. I've seen discussions in various security forums is that if you can't code, you can't be a security professional. Okay, I know a lot of people actually in security, most of them can't code, right? So I think we're not different in the sense that we need to be as good or as interested as the network team or the hosting team. Each of them has specialization. It is true that security probably needs to know more in terms of broader IT, right? If it's not enough that you look at cloud environments, it's not enough that you look at network, you need to look at as a whole. But as individuals, you can basically get people that are working in IT or want to work in IT, and they will be as good as security people.
Yeah, I agree. It's I always keep saying this. If attackers don't discriminate who they decide to target, elder, younger, like one gender versus the other, then when it comes to security, we also should have the diversity of thinking, the way we approach different problems. So I definitely agree. Yeah. And so what do you think, what are some ways companies can create a great security culture even for non-technical employees?
You mean for the employees, not necessarily for the security team?
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, the training that you do around security needs to be very short, very focused, and as fun as possible. Because I've been in several companies that you start your work in the company, you need to go through 20 different e-learnings. All of them tell you in a very serious tone, you have to do this or the world will end. Yeah, the security e-learnings are not different, right? So I think that micro training, very short, basic training, and then you train the people again on the right moments. Occasionally you send them the 1 minute quiz or the 1 minute video. I think that's a good way to do that. Same goes for the phishing training. I mean, we all kind of are doing that today. We are sending a lot of phishing simulations. Make it fun, right? Don't try to catch employees. Tell you fell for that for 5 times. Now we're going to fire you, right? It needs to be interesting. You need to catch their attention. One thing that I found that is working quite well is to train employees on how to keep secure at home, how to keep it on their own environment secure. Because you teach them practices that if they do them properly, then that will work for your working environment as well, right? And people are interested in keeping themselves secure at home. So kind of connect them to the reality of how you secure all environment. And of course, you can do things which are not related to their day job. You can do escape rooms. Cyber escape rooms are quite popular today. You can do hackathons. You can do even more advanced training for people that are interested in learning more how to be technical. Maybe you'll get new employees in the future. So it's generally speaking, it's you make it friendly, make it very focused, and you don't bother people that much as possible.
Yeah, you gotta make it fun. You have to sort of educate that it's not only for the company, it's for your own sake. Because if you learn how to keep your company secure, you're also indirectly learning how to keep yourself secure and your data out there, which is so important these days. So
Yeah.
what is next for you, Tal? You're known as a recovering CISO, CTO. What's next on your plate?
Well, at the moment, I'm really just enjoying not doing much. It's nice to take some time off after several very, very busy years. And, I'm looking for new opportunities, and hopefully something will come at some point. For the time being, I'm really happy just working on my cooking skills as well. My hummus got much better than it used to be. So that's already an achievement for me.
Oh, wow. Wow. I'm a big fan of hummus, so yeah,
Have to be.
I think it's amazing, to be able to take a bit of a break after such being a CISO, being secure at the end of the day is still quite stressful place to be in and stressful positions to be in, because you have to consider it's still a security space. There is ransomware going on. Every year there is a new attack coming in. And as you said yourself, you have to constantly educate yourself about the new things coming in. So it's very important to also take that mental break, which also brings me in for the next question and our tradition on the podcast. So typically our previous guest would ask question to our next guest. So our previous guest actually asked you, how do you stay up to date with technology as the world is changing?
Well, first of all, I'm going to have word with your previous guest, as I know him about asking these kind of questions. So I'm definitely going to give him a call afterwards. I think for me specifically, because I sit on several advisory boards of startups, and I also sit with various venture capital funds that invest in cybersecurity startups, that helps me see what things are happening. I see the new attempts of startups to secure problems. I see the new threats coming that the VCs are looking to invest against. So that really helps, being in touch with the cybersecurity industry in that sense. And I think other than that is reading. It's a lot of reading. It's a lot of keeping curiosity all the time. It's playing around with stuff. I have a tendency to get new technologies to my home every time and just play with it as much as I can, and sometimes with disastrous effects. And then I get my wife, who is as technical as me, but she doesn't like to play with these things so much. But she then rolls my eyes and can you please restore it to what it used to be and stop playing with crazy shit. So it's be curious mostly, I think.
Yeah. So, what if you could give your top 3 recommendations, what to read today to stay most up to date? What would you recommend?
I don't think I have anything specific or a specific website that I'm looking. It's mostly just keeping with whatever the news are coming. I read a lot on Twitter, on various technical Twitters that I'm looking at. There's one podcast I'm following regularly, but it's in Hebrew, so I'm not sure it's going to be very useful for most people, but it's a funny one. It's called Cyber. It's kind of an in-joke in the Israeli industry. It's basically very technical people that are telling war stories about really bad things that happen and why they happen. But then you need to be a Hebrew speaker to actually understand that.
No. Yeah, hopefully it's going to get translated. I think today there are quite a few cybersecurity podcasts that are coming out, and it's so good to see that this space is finally opening up for the rest of the people that can't really join the boardrooms and have this visibility, the kind of conversations that are going on. So yeah. I think it's amazing to see people like you joining the podcast.
There's one I do want to recommend, but it's not a technical one. It's a different one. It's more on the human angle, and it's called the Imposter Syndrome Network. And essentially, it's a podcast with two cyber professionals that are interviewing quite senior people about their kind of journey in cybersecurity. And then, if you know the term imposter syndrome, how they tackled that issue, because I think it's quite a big problem in the security industry, especially because we're not as organized as other parts of IT. So I think that's quite a nice podcast to listen to.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna check it out myself after this. So yeah, what question would you like to ask to our next guest?
For me, it will be interesting to hear what the next guest is thinking will be the next big threat in the cybersecurity world. And I would hope that they wouldn't just say ransomware or AI, because everyone is saying that. I'm kind of looking for an angle I haven't thought about yet. So that's for me will be interesting to hear.
Yeah, it would be interesting to hear. I'm thinking who's our next guest, but every time I ask questions to the next guest, they're always surprised by the kind of questions that are being brought up. So I'll make sure to pass it to you, whatever they're going to answer. But yeah, it's been amazing to have you, Tal, on our podcast. We've talked about so many topics about your journey and the way it kind of shaped the way you look at security today. What are the perks at Carlsberg? What are the ways that you can build the teams and establish this trust, whether you're building it from the start or that's something that you're just joining and building it afterwards. I think there are quite a few important lessons there. And just overall, when it comes to leadership, what are the strategies you're supposed to pick as you like growing in that industry, and whether you're looking to switch from one industry to another or just level yourself up as a security leader. So it's been amazing, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for having me.